The new year is generally seen as a time to focus on new goals or refocus our paths in life, which was absolutely no different for Ana Walshe, who was looking forward to her plans in 2023. She appeared to have it all: a husband, 3 young children and a blossoming career, so friends and family were deeply concerned when she suddenly disappeared on the 1st of January 2023. With this case still developing and new grisly evidence coming to light, could the mystery behind this case actually lead back to her husband, Brian Walshe? Let's dive into this case and let me know in the comments, do you think Brian is guilty of the unthinkable? Let me know what your thoughts are on what has really happened to Ana Walshe. Today we're visiting Cohasset in Massachusetts, where Ana and Brian Walshe lived with their 3 young sons. Ana was born in Belgrade in Serbia in 1983. She was hugely ambitious, gaining a bachelor's degree in French language and literature at the University of Belgrade. She later emigrated to the United States in 2005, where she completed a master's degree in hospitality management at Cornell University. Ana previously worked at luxury hotels as a manager, which is how she met her husband Brian in 2008, while working at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox. At the time, Ana was already married to a chef called Mark Knipp, who she later divorced in 2014. Ana and Brian later married on the 21st of December 2015 in Boston and went on to have 3 sons who were aged 6, 4 and 2 years old at the time of their mum's disappearance. Ana had recently started a new job only a year prior in 2022 as a regional general manager at the real estate firm Tishman Speyer. The role was located in Washington, D.C., meaning she would travel home on a weekend to visit her family in Massachusetts. Ana would regularly share photos with the world of her really lavish lifestyle through Instagram. Holidays, food, empowering quotes, a glimpse at her family life, and even a photo showing that Brian had bought her childhood dream car for Valentine's Day, a Maserati. The couple appeared to have it all, seemingly happily married with 3 young children, all while living a very lavish lifestyle. So what on earth went wrong? Why and how did 39-year-old Ana just suddenly vanish? The couple had hosted a New Year's Eve dinner with some friends on the 31st of December 2022, which is the last time that Ana was ever seen alive. Their friends left at between 1 and half 1 in the morning, at which time the couple just went to bed. Brian reported that Ana had a work emergency to attend, so she left for work in an Uber between 6 and 7 a.m. the next morning on the 1st of January 2023 to catch a flight back to Washington. However, Ana never showed up for work on the 4th of January as planned. So concerned, Ana's employers called the police. The police visited their Cohasset home at 6:30 p.m. that day. Brian was home, but of course he would be, as he was actually on house arrest at this time, so where else would he be? I'll come back to the details of how the house arrest came about in a little bit, but first let's run through the timeline that Brian gave to the officers. He claims that Ana got ready for work, kissed him goodbye and told him to go back to sleep, then she left for work in a taxi between 6 and 7 a.m. A babysitter arrived that afternoon while Brian visited his mum an hour away in Swampscott at 4 p.m. He claims that he didn't have his phone, so he ended up getting lost during the journey, making the trip longer than usual. He stayed for only 15 minutes at his mum's house before running errands for her and returned home at around 8 p.m. The following day, on the 2nd of January, Brian took one of his children to a juice bar for ice cream, while the other 2 children stayed at home with the babysitter. Then, as we already know, a couple of days later, on the 4th of January, Ana's employer called the police. A search was launched in the wooded areas near their home with canine officers, and investigations were underway. Ana was known to contact Brian and her sons daily while she was away at work, so Wouldn't Brian be concerned before now, with there being 3 days already with no contact? Police investigated Brian's claims and started to realise that things just weren't quite adding up. At least 6 officers had reportedly drove around trying to verify Brian's claimed whereabouts on the 1st of January. They discovered that there was no surveillance footage of Brian running errands for his mum in Swampscott, as Brian had claimed. They also came to realise that there was no booking at all for an Uber or a taxi to take Ana to the airport on New Year's Day, and also confirmed that Ana did not board the already booked plane. With this, a search warrant was issued for Brian's home at 9:20 a.m. on the 8th of January, where Brian was arrested for misleading a police investigation. During the search, blood was discovered in the boot of his Volvo SUV, and red and brown stains, consistent with blood, was found on the basement door, which had been padlocked. Within the basement, they found a partially damaged bloody knife and tarps. From then, an absolute mountain of evidence began to surface. I'll just take us through what the police found between Ana going missing and Brian's arrest in a little bit more detail. So, police later came to discover really disturbing Google searches that Brian had made during the early hours on New Year's Day. Some included how long before a body starts to smell, how to stop a body from decomposing, dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body, and how to clean blood from wooden floor. I'll just also add that all of these Google searches were found on the eldest son's iPad. He was only 6 years old. Brian was allowed to request time to leave his house arrest. Time allowance was already set in place to carry out the school runs, which was the time that Brian used to take his son for ice cream. And evidence also supported this visit. As you can see here, he was captured on CCTV. It almost looks as though he's purposely trying to be seen by the cameras. But he also requested additional time to visit his mum on New Year's Day. He claims that she had a cataract surgery that day and that he was going to collect his mum from the hospital and take her back home. However, she allegedly recovered really quickly and so drove herself back home. But Brian thought he'd still take the opportunity to leave his home because why not? He'd already requested and been granted the leave. Although there'd been no surveillance footage of Brian in Swampscott, there was, however, footage of Brian in other stores that he'd visited that day that he failed to mention to police. The first of which being on the 1st of January. Brian visited Lowe's and purchased 5 5-gallon buckets, a hacksaw, a Tyvek full coverage suit, 200 disposable rags, bin bags and cleaning products, and then more footage showed him purchasing 13 different types of hydrogen peroxide from a CVS store. While investigating, police were granted permission to ping Ana's phone, which connected to a tower only 0.7 miles from their Cohasset home on New Year's Eve, through until 3:14 a.m. on the 2nd of January, when her phone was turned off. Brian had claimed that Ana had already left for work, so surely her phone shouldn't still be pinging in the Massachusetts area, and least of all, close to their home. That same day, on the 2nd of January, Brian violated his house arrest to visit Home Goods, where he purchased 3 rugs. He then made some more really ominous Google searches. Hacksaw, best tool to dismember. Can you be charged with murder without a body? And can you identify a body with broken teeth? Later that day, he also visited Home Depot, wearing blue medical gloves and a black medical face mask, and made a $450 cash purchase of cleaning products, mops, buckets, tarps, goggles, baking soda, and a hatchet. Yet even more Google searches were then made on the 3rd of January. What happens to hair on a dead body? What is the rate of decomposition in a plastic bag compared to in the woods? Can baking soda mask or make a body smell good? I'm sorry, but surely these searches are only made by someone who's committed a really terrible crime, because who generally wants to know this kind of information? Once again, even more footage was discovered, this time at an apartment complex in Abington at 4:27 p.m. He could be seen exiting his car with a really heavy bin bag, which he put into a dumpster. He then travelled to another apartment complex dumpster in the same town at 4:48 p.m. and another in a different town at 5:10 p.m. All of these visits also violated his house arrest, as they were areas that weren't agreed to prior. Tragically, all of these bags had already been taken away and incinerated before police were able to track them down, so the definite contents are unknown. Brian made a final shopping trip when on the 4th of January he visited Lowe's and Home Goods yet again, this time to purchase towels and bath mats, squeegees and a bin. This was also the same day that Ana was reported missing. Some other details that police had picked up on when carrying out the welfare check was that the back seats were down in Brian's vehicle with a plastic liner in the back. The next day, this liner had been removed and freshly vacuumed streaks were in the carpet. Investigators then received an email on the 7th of January stating, "We have the so-named Ana Walshe with us here. We had a deal worth $127,000. She messed up. We have her here with us, and if she doesn't pay the money, then she'll never be back. And we know that the police and the FBI are involved. Good luck finding us." Police found this ransom note to be really suspicious, as it didn't give any instructions on how or when to respond by. Brian's mobile phone data showed him to be in Swampscott on the 5th of January, where a few days later, on the 9th of January, police found 10 bin bags in a dumpster at an apartment complex near Brian's mum's home. These bags contained rugs, cleaning products and towels, Ana's hunter boots, slippers, her Prada purse, a piece of her Gucci necklace, and Ana's COVID-19 vaccine card, as well as a Tyvek full body suit, a hatchet and a hacksaw. Just 3 of the items that Brian had just recently purchased. Disturbingly, amongst these items was blood, and later a bone fragment was found on the hacksaw. Lab tests show positive DNA matches from the blood on the slippers and the Tyvek suit to both Ana and Brian. On the 17th of January, more charges were added to his existing charge of misleading a police investigation, including improper transport of a human body and murder. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. To this day, Ana's body has still never been found. Tragically, Ana's mum revealed that Ana had messaged her on the 25th of December 2022, just a week before she disappeared, requesting her mum to come visit her in Washington the next day. Ana didn't disclose why the urgency, but unfortunately her mother wasn't able to do so and said that she could visit in January for 2 months instead. Her mum feels that this was a possible indicator that there may have actually been problems in her daughter's life. Messages between the two hint at the couple not getting along with one another with regards to the kids. Another of Brian's searches may also point towards this, as before any of this happening, on the 27th of December he searched, "What's the best state to divorce for a man?" Ana also tried to call her mum, her sister and her maid of honour late on New Year's Eve and in the early hours of New Year's Day, but none of her calls were answered. Her mum massively regrets not being able to answer her calls or to visit her, as she now can't contact her at all. She said, "And now I can't forgive myself for not just letting things fall where they may, and just go, and whatever happens to me, happens. And now I regret not getting the phone, because she's disappeared." Ana's mum has also said that she doesn't believe that her son-in-law will have harmed her daughter, claiming that he actually saved her life in the past. Brian had heard his mother-in-law's cries as she suffered a pain in her head he reportedly dropped everything he was doing and rushed her to a hospital. It turned out that his mother-in-law was having a stroke. She states that he also helped to look after her during her recovery. She said how much Brian would miss Ana while she was working away, and that as far as she knew, everything was perfectly fine between the two. However, her mum was not aware that many years prior, in 2014, Ana had reported that her boyfriend at the time had threatened hers and her friends' lives over a phone call. This person was Brian Walshe. Ana refused to participate in any prosecution, however, so no charges were ever made. They married 1 year later. So who actually is Brian Walshe, and how did he land himself a house arrest? Buckle up for this one because he has quite the history. Brian Walshe was 47 at the time of Ana's disappearance and is said to be the primary caregiver of their 3 children. He has what is described as quite a tumultuous legal history. The house arrest that we previously talked about a little while ago was the result of art fraud. A friend of Brian's from South Korea had 2 authentic Andy Warhol shadow paintings, which Brian suggested that he could sell for a really good price. So his friend agreed, and Brian listed the paintings on eBay in November 2016 for $100,000. He included a photo of the paintings, a photo of the Warhol Foundation authentication stamps, and a purchase invoice price of $240,000. An interested buyer from California then contacted Brian about the paintings and arranged a purchase outside of eBay for $80,000. On the 7th of November, the buyer's assistant flew to Boston to purchase the paintings from Brian. They signed an agreement that a full refund could be made if the paintings aren't accepted within 3 days. Brian instantly paid $24,900 in credit card bills. The following day, the buyer removed the frames to find that there was no authentication stamps and noticed that the canvases and the staples looked really new. He compared the paintings that he received to the images in the eBay listing and noticed that they weren't identical. So the buyer concluded that the paintings that he'd received weren't authentic and repeatedly tried to contact Brian but received no response. Eventually Brian did answer, but he just gave excuse after excuse for the delay in refunding, saying that he was having bank trouble. Brian eventually returned only $30,000 of the $80,000 that he owed. The buyer then contacted the FBI. Brian had actually sold the original paintings to a gallery and had obtained forgeries of the originals from a college friend. Just like with his other friend, Brian offered to try and help sell the copied paintings. Neither friend was ever compensated after completing a sale. In April 2021, Brian pleaded guilty to 1 count each of wire fraud, interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud, and unlawful monetary transaction. He was placed on house arrest and wore a location monitoring device while he awaited his sentencing. During his house arrest, Brian wrote a letter to the federal judge expressing how he was extremely sorry for his past conduct and claims to have changed. Ana also wrote a letter expressing her gratitude for having Brian at home during the proceedings. He received his sentence in February 2024 of 37 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Personally, I don't think this is the only time that Brian Walshe is going to be serving. This investigation had also revealed that sometime in 2011, Brian had obtained a different set of replica shadow paintings from an artist, and in 2015, Brian sold the set to another victim who lived in France for $145,000. Allegedly, Brian and Ana went shopping at Prada after this particular sale. This is just one factor of Brian's past. We still have even more to uncover. Brian's father's nephew, or Brian's cousin, Andrew, and his dad's close friends described Brian as a dishonest, very angry and physically violent person, and also labelled him as a sociopath. Brian's dad, Dr. Thomas Walshe, was a renowned neurologist and passed away suddenly in India in 2018. Andrew had stated that his uncle Thomas had a severe falling out with his son. Brian had run off with a significant amount of his money. He had almost zero contact with Brian over the last 10 plus years. It's alleged that Brian had taken almost $1 million from his dad and then just disappeared from his life. Thomas's friends claim that he gave his son a really comfortable life, only to be betrayed, which just created an unrepairable rift. Due to this, Thomas bequeathed his son from his will, leaving Brian only his best wishes and nothing else from his estate. All of Thomas's estate was left to his nephew, Andrew. Brian was absolutely furious with this and claimed his dad was too poorly to sign his will and that the signature must have been forged. Brian then destroyed the will and had himself appointed as the personal representative of the estate. Brian withdrew over $100,000 from his dad's account and sold all of his belongings, including a car, jewellery and paintings. Brian had also prepared to sell the house, but Thomas's friend and Andrew intervened through court. A copy of the will had been left out in Thomas's oceanfront home, to which a friend of Thomas had a key. He'd noticed the will, and knowing how untrustworthy Brian was, he took a photo of the actual will before it disappeared. Thomas's friend had said that Thomas left his family when Brian was young, claiming it to have been a severely dysfunctional and hostile environment. He'd also said that Brian had been a long-term patient at a psychiatric hospital where he was diagnosed as a sociopath. Within the letter that Ana had written to the court about Brian's house arrest, she had also hinted at Brian's troubled childhood. She wrote, "He was taught to lie and hide. He was told he was a loser, that his parents should not have had him, that he had no chances of making anything of himself in life, and that he was a lost cause. A deep feeling of shame governed his life." A couple of Brian's former friends also gave a little insight to Brian's life. They stated that his source of income was a mystery and never clear. When he was asked, he'd just give really vague and varied explanations. An art dealer would be one of his examples, while leaving out the fact that they were actually fake. They'd also reveal that Brian would often borrow money off people, with his credit cards declining and running into what he'd call card trouble. On one occasion, he ran up a $6,000 tab at a restaurant and ran into the said card trouble and couldn't pay. He left his watch as collateral and returned the next day with cash and an extra $2,000 to settle the inconvenience. So was the luxurious lifestyle that Brian liked to portray actually just as fake as the paintings that he sold? Getting back to the disappearance of his wife, Ana, Brian's defence had highlighted that a body has not yet been found and there is no indication of how or even if Ana has died. They've said that there is no motive and no weapon. Also, under Massachusetts law, a person is not presumed dead until missing for 7 years or more. They also revealed that Brian had actually contacted Ana's employer just before they reported her missing to police to ask them if they knew of her whereabouts, as he hadn't heard from her. Prosecutors, however, stand by the mountain of grown evidence against Brian. The surveillance footage, the purchases at various locations, the grisly searches, as well as all the items found in the dumpster. All Brian could do when listening to his alleged searches being read out was shake his head. Other than this, he showed absolutely no emotion throughout court and just kept a calm demeanour.
At 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. At 5:20 a.m., he searched how to embalm a body. At 5:47 a.m., 10 ways to dispose Dispose of a dead body if you really need to.
Prosecutors also indicate and hint at a couple of possible motives. The first being that Brian was suspicious of Ana possibly having an affair since November 2022. His mum actually hired a private investigator in Washington for while Ana was at work. Brian also knew of this, but his defence claim that Brian called his mum crazy for doing so and said that Ana is a good person. He says this, yet reports show that Brian would routinely visit the Instagram accounts of Ana's male friends in Washington. Since Ana's disappearance, it's been revealed that Ana was in a dating relationship with a man in Washington, as court documents report. Their relationship had been getting more serious over the past few months and was spending more time together. They spent Thanksgiving together in Dublin and also spent Christmas Eve together. They also had plans to celebrate the New Year on the 4th of January when she'd returned to Washington. Instagram posts and family members also hint at the full Walshe household eventually moving to Washington, but they were just waiting for the whole ordeal with Brian's art fraud to be over with. The second possible motive that they've hinted at is money and to sustain his lavish lifestyle. It had actually been discovered that Ana has more than $2.7 million in life insurance on her herself, all with Brian as the sole beneficiary. On top of all of this, Ana had also amassed a property portfolio worth $2.8 million. So was her husband just trying to inherit all of her wealth? Brian's defence, however, argued that he is not in need of any money, as it said that his mum is very wealthy and has given him tens of thousands of dollars over the years. But it's also reported that he could no longer afford a private lawyer, so was eventually assigned a court-appointed attorney. Prosecutors suspect that Brian beat Ana to death, dismembered her and disposed of her body across multiple transfer stations, which were tragically incinerated before investigators were even able to search those sites. Reports show that they're still waiting to receive all DNA evidence and that it will likely be destroyed during testing, so these tests and results are crucial. Brian's attorneys have said that they won't comment on any of the allegations and plan to try the case in court and not in the media. They have also said that prosecutors haven't provided any evidence. They said, "In my experience where, as here, the prosecution leaks so-called evidence to the press before they provide it to me, their case isn't that strong. When they have a strong case, they give me everything as soon as possible. We shall see what they have and what evidence is admissible in court, where the case will ultimately be decided." Currently, Brian's trial is set to begin on the 21st of October 2025 and is expected to last no more than 4 weeks. Today, he is currently being held without bail. Ana has been noticed as a brilliant businesswoman and a supermom. Her work colleague and friend described her as an absolute radiant spirit, the kind of person that when you walk into a room, you just feel her energy. She went on to say, "I think the truth is a real double-edged sword. It's painful to know, but it's necessary. I think that the kids should know what happened to their mother, no matter what." Her friends and family all say there is no way that she would just abandon her 3 children and her career that she's worked so hard to build. The children are now in the state's care. I think this case is going to be a really interesting one to keep an eye on and just see what more evidence might actually come to light. So what do you really think happened to Ana? Do you think Brian is guilty, or do you think that something else might have happened? Let me know in the comments. I really appreciate every single one of you watching my videos too, especially if you've made it right to the end. If you would like to see more content from me, then please do also hit the subscribe button.